The heavy rain outside mirrored the somber atmosphere within the grand office of Whitmore and Associates. Dark oak panels lined the walls, and a faint scent of old leather filled the air. Evelyn Clark sat stiffly in the leather armchair, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Beside her, Oliver Clark tapped his foot impatiently, his jaw set in a tight line. Mr. Whitmore, a sharp-eyed man in his 60s, adjusted his spectacles before beginning. His voice was calm, almost cold. As stipulated by the late Mr. Arthur Clark, he began, his entire estate, including all properties, financial assets and business interests, shall be inherited solely by his youngest daughter, Miss Evelyn Clark. The words hung in the air, growing heavier with each second. Oliver shot to his feet, his face flushing deep red. "This is absurd," he barked, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "She is a child. She has no idea how to manage any of this." Evelyn's heart pounded painfully against her ribs, but she said nothing. Mr. Whitmore merely arched an eyebrow, unfazed. "The terms are clear, Mr. Clark," he said, sliding a thick manila envelope across the table towards Evelyn. "Furthermore, Miss Clark has been entrusted with a private letter from her father. He wished it to be read by her alone." Oliver's fists clenched at his sides, but he held his tongue. "For now." Evelyn reached out with trembling fingers, taking the envelope. Her name was written in her father's familiar, careful script. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. She needed to be strong. Mr. Whitmore closed the folder and stood. "This concludes the formal reading. Should you have any disputes, Mr. Clark, I suggest you pursue them through legal channels. Good day." Without another word, he exited the room, leaving the siblings alone in a silence thick with resentment. Oliver turned to Evelyn, his eyes dark with fury. "This isn't over," he hissed before storming out, the door slamming shut behind him. Left alone, Evelyn stared down at the envelope in her hands. Somewhere within it, she sensed, was an answer that would change everything she thought she knew. She slipped it into her coat pocket, her mind racing. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one that was about to break over their lives. Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, the letter trembling in her hands. The rain still hammered against the windows of the old family estate, and the wind howled through the ancient chimneys like restless spirits. She took a deep breath and carefully opened the envelope, pulling out a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper. The handwriting was unmistakably her father's, strong yet elegant. "My dearest Evelyn," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am no longer by your side. I am sorry for the burdens I have left you with, but you must understand, it was necessary. You must protect our family's legacy. Not everything is as it seems." Evelyn's eyes scanned the page hungrily. Every word felt like a thread pulling her deeper into a tapestry of secrets she had never suspected. "There is a room," the letter continued, "beneath the west wing. You will find the entrance behind the bookcase in the old study. Use the key I hid inside the grandfather clock. What you discover there will explain everything." A shiver ran down Evelyn's spine. She remembered the old study, a place no one visited anymore, sealed off since her father's health began to decline. The grandfather clock stood proudly in the hallway outside it, its golden hands frozen in time. The letter ended with a final, chilling line. "Trust no one. Especially not Oliver." The paper slipped from her fingers and drifted to the floor. She stared at it, her mind racing. Had Oliver known about this? Was that why he was so furious at the reading of the will? Slowly, Evelyn rose from her bed. She slipped on her boots and wrapped a thick shawl around her shoulders. The house creaked and groaned as she moved through its shadowed halls, her only light a small torch. The grandfather clock loomed ahead, silent and solemn. Evelyn approached it with trembling hands, searching its carved wooden face for a clue. At last, her fingers brushed against a hidden latch behind the clock's pendulum. With a soft click, a small compartment popped open, revealing a brass key, cold and heavy in her palm. Heart hammering, she turned towards the study. Whatever lay hidden behind that bookcase, her life would never be the same after tonight. Evelyn stood before the study door, key clutched tightly in her hand. The old oak door groaned as she pushed it open, revealing a room frozen in time. Dust cloaked every surface. Shelves sagged under the weight of forgotten books. A heavy velvet curtain hung limp over the tall windows, blocking out the storm outside. Her torchlight swept across the room until it landed on the grand bookcase along the far wall. It was taller than she remembered, packed tightly with worn volumes. Her father's secret entrance lay hidden there. Somewhere. Evelyn moved quickly but carefully, her fingers running along the edges of the shelves. She pulled at titles, tapped the panels, feeling for anything unusual. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer with the thundering rain and the distant crash of thunder. Finally she found it, a book that did not quite fit. Its spine was blank, and when she tugged at it, there was a sharp click. A soft mechanical whir filled the air as the bookcase creaked open a fraction, revealing a narrow shadowy passage beyond. Evelyn hesitated for a breath, her pulse pounding in her ears. Then, steeling herself, she squeezed through the gap. The passage was cold, the air damp and heavy. The stone walls pressed close on either side, forcing her to stoop as she moved forward. Her torch caught glimpses of old paintings hung along the corridor, dark, grim faces of ancestors she barely recognized. At the end of the passage, another door awaited. This one was made of iron, streaked with rust and bolted shut. Evelyn inserted the brass key into the lock. It turned with surprising ease. The door swung open with a mournful groan. Inside, the room was utterly silent. Evelyn stepped in, her light falling on rows of ancient chests, cabinets, and dusty crates stacked to the ceiling. This was her family's hidden vault. But before she could take another step, her torch flickered and died. The darkness swallowed her. Frozen in place, Evelyn barely dared to breathe. Then she heard it, a faint shuffle behind her, like footsteps in the dark. Someone else was here. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as the soft scuffling sound grew closer. She stood rooted to the spot, heart hammering against her ribs. The torch in her hand remained dead, leaving her utterly blind. Then, a faint whisper. It was so soft she barely caught it over the pounding of her own heartbeat. "Who's there?" Evelyn demanded, forcing her voice to stay steady. It echoed against the cold stone walls, swallowed by the thick darkness. No answer. She reached into her coat pocket, fumbling for her lighter. Her fingers brushed against the cold metal, and she yanked it out, striking it quickly. A small, trembling flame leapt to life. In the flickering light, Evelyn saw a figure at the far end of the room. It was a man, dressed in a long dark coat, his face hidden beneath the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. He stood perfectly still, watching her with an unsettling calmness. Evelyn gritted her teeth, forcing herself to stay composed. "Who are you?" she asked, voice sharper now. The man took a slow step forward, boots scraping against the stone floor. Evelyn instinctively backed away, her lighter trembling in her hand. "You shouldn't be here," the man said finally, his voice low and gravelly, almost blending with the sighing of the wind beyond the vault walls. "This is my family's estate," Evelyn retorted, regaining some measure of courage. The man chuckled softly, a sound without humor. "It was," he said, "long ago. But the debts your father owed were never paid. And now, others come to collect." A chill ran down Evelyn's spine. "What do you mean?" she asked, though part of her feared the answer. The man tilted his head slightly, studying her. Then, without another word, he turned and slipped into the shadows behind one of the towering crates. Evelyn rushed after him, but he was gone, vanished into the maze of the vault. Only silence remained. But the man's final words echoed in her mind, refusing to fade. "Others come to collect." And somewhere deep in the vault, something stirred. Something that had been waiting a very long time. Evelyn moved cautiously now, her lighter casting nervous shadows on the cracked stone walls. The vault, she realized, was much larger than she had first thought. It twisted and turned like a labyrinth, with countless corridors and locked doors. Each door was carved with strange symbols. Some looked almost ancient, others more recent, like someone had tried to reinforce the original carvings with modern metalwork. She brushed her fingers over one symbol. The stone beneath was colder than ice. The air grew heavier the deeper she went. A metallic scent, like old blood and rust, filled her nostrils. Evelyn wrapped her coat tighter around herself, resisting the urge to turn back. A soft breeze stirred her hair. She turned sharply. At the end of the corridor, one of the doors stood slightly ajar. It hadn't been open before. Heart hammering, Evelyn approached. She pushed the door open wider, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. Inside, the walls were lined with old bookshelves crammed with ancient tomes. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it, a thick book bound in cracked leather. It pulsed faintly, as if breathing. Evelyn hesitated at the threshold. She knew instinctively that crossing into that room would change everything. Yet something stronger than fear drove her forward. She stepped inside. As she approached the pedestal, words appeared across the book's surface, glowing faintly. Blood binds. Secrets curse. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she reached out to touch the book. But before her fingers made contact, a sudden whisper filled the air. Not a voice, but thousands of voices, layered over one another. They spoke in a language she did not understand, yet somehow knew was directed at her. The stone floor shuddered beneath her feet. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The door behind her slammed shut with a deafening boom. Evelyn spun around, trapped. In the faint light, shadows began to crawl from the corners of the room. Not mere tricks of the eye, but dark shapes moving with intent. And standing among them, half hidden by the swirling darkness, was the man in the wide-brimmed hat. Watching. Waiting. Evelyn backed away from the pedestal, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The man with the wide-brimmed hat remained perfectly still, as if he were part of the darkness itself. His face was still hidden, obscured by the shadows, but Evelyn could feel the intensity of his gaze. It was like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest, suffocating and relentless. The whispers grew louder, circling around her like a rising storm. The man slowly lifted his hand and pointed to the book. Evelyn shook her head instinctively, her heart thudding painfully. Every fiber of her being screamed at her not to touch it. But as if some unseen force had taken control, her feet began to move forward. "No," she whispered, her voice lost among the thousand others. Her fingers brushed the cracked leather. The moment she made contact, a jolt shot through her body, burning cold and searing hot at once. Images flooded her mind, a grand house falling into ruin, faces she had never seen before, a ritual under the blood-red moon. And always the man in the hat watching. She staggered back, tearing her hand away. The room spun around her. The shadows lashed out, whispering secrets too terrible to comprehend. Through the haze, Evelyn saw the man tilt his head slightly, almost as if he were smiling. A voice, not from within the room but inside her own mind, spoke. "You cannot leave now." Panic flared in Evelyn's chest. She ran to the door, yanking at the heavy handle. It refused to budge. The room laughed, not with sound, but with the creaking of stone and the rasp of ancient air. The man moved closer. Evelyn pressed her back to the door, searching frantically for something, anything she could use to defend herself. Suddenly, from the corner of her eye, she noticed a second door behind the shelves, barely visible, half covered by cobwebs. With a burst of desperate energy, she darted toward it, ripping aside the brittle webs. Her hands found a cold iron latch. She threw it open and stumbled into another passageway, slamming the door behind her. Darkness swallowed her again, but she was moving now, driven by terror and the faint hope that somewhere, somehow, there would be a way out. Behind her, the soft, deliberate sound of footsteps followed. The air in the passageway was colder, thick with the scent of damp earth and mildew. Evelyn stumbled forward, her hands outstretched to feel the rough stone walls on either side. Every few steps, the passage forked into new directions, like the veins of some monstrous underground creature. Left or right, forward or back. It was impossible to tell which way led to safety. Behind her, the footsteps continued, slow and deliberate. She forced herself to keep moving, taking random turns, hoping to lose her pursuer. Her heart pounded in her ears, louder than the soft whispers that still clung to the air like mist. Suddenly, the stone floor beneath her gave way to something different. Old wooden boards that creaked under her weight. She paused, listening. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a low groaning sound, deep and ancient, rose from the darkness around her. The floorboards trembled, and Evelyn realized with a sickening jolt that the ground might collapse. She darted forward, not caring which way she went, as long as she moved. The passage twisted and turned like a snake. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, glowing faintly as she passed. They pulsed with a sickly green light, giving just enough illumination to reveal more doors, hundreds of them, lining the endless corridor. Each door was different. Some made of iron, others of rotting wood, a few covered with strange moving patterns. Evelyn stopped in front of one that looked relatively normal. A plain oak door, slightly ajar. A cold breeze whispered from within. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The room beyond was small, barely larger than a closet. A single oil lamp flickered on a hook, casting long, jittery shadows. On the far wall hung a mirror, old and cracked. And in the mirror, Evelyn saw herself, but not as she was now. The reflection was smiling. Evelyn froze, dread gripping her. Her reflection raised a hand and beckoned. "No!" Evelyn breathed, stepping back. But the door behind her slammed shut with a thunderous bang, trapping her inside. The reflection in the mirror began to move, independent of her, crossing the threshold between glass and reality. The whispers grew deafening, and the lamp flickered violently. Evelyn backed against the wall, searching for another exit. There was none. The thing that wore her face stepped closer, its smile stretching wider, its eyes hollow and hungry. Then, just as it reached out to her, the lamp shattered, plunging the room into pitch black. Darkness swallowed Evelyn whole. She pressed herself against the cold wall, her breath shallow, ears straining for any sound. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a faint glow appeared, not from the broken lamp, but from the mirror itself. The cracked glass shimmered, and the reflection, the creature wearing her face, was gone. In its place, a door slowly materialized on the mirror's surface, framed by ancient runes. A low hum filled the room, vibrating through the stone and into Evelyn's bones. With no other choice, she stepped forward and placed her hand on the shimmering surface. It rippled like water, and with a gasp, she was pulled through. Evelyn stumbled out into a vast underground hall, unlike anything she had seen before. Rows of statues lined the walls, each one carved in the likeness of her ancestors. Their faces, some stern, others sorrowful, watched her every move. At the end of the hall stood a raised dais, and upon it, a coffin carved from black marble. The coffin lid was slightly open. Evelyn's legs trembled as she approached. From the gap in the coffin, something glittered, a small ornate box encrusted with emeralds. Beside it lay a letter, yellowed with age, sealed with the crest of her family. She picked up the letter first, breaking the brittle wax. The words inside were written in a hand she recognized, her father's. "My dearest Evelyn," it began, "if you are reading this, then you have uncovered the truth I could not speak aloud." The letter spoke of the family's hidden pact, made generations ago, a bargain for wealth and power at a terrible cost. Every heir was marked, cursed to face the shadows of the past. "You must make a choice," the letter concluded. "Claim the inheritance and continue the legacy, or destroy it and be free." Evelyn's hands shook as she opened the emerald box. Inside was a single key, blackened with age. The ground trembled, and a rumbling filled the chamber. Statues began to crack and shift, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The shadows her family had bound were waking. Evelyn clutched the key tightly, her mind racing. She could see two doors at the far end of the hall, one gilded, shining with promise, the other old and crumbling, almost hidden in the darkness. Her choice was clear, but the consequences were not. Behind her, the first statue stepped down from its pedestal, stone fingers twitching hungrily. With a deep breath, Evelyn ran, the key tight in her grasp, as the past of her bloodline closed in behind her.